Do you have a response?
Yes. So all of these methods that are listed up there are very important, and scientists are aware of them. Scientists have been developing them. In fact, many of them have been developed through animal research. In fact, furthermore, consider how much of the information that Ray presented tonight is based on animal research, almost all of it. He's coming up with one conclusion, I'm coming up with another. With respect to the alternatives, I and all scientists that I know favor moving toward human studies when that's possible. That's why the slide about ego and guilt and greed may explain why some people use animals, but not any scientists that I know. To a scientist, the issue is answering a question, testing an hypothesis. And if there is no other way to do that than use an animal, that scientist will use an animal. If another way comes along, that scientist will shift. I've seen it many times. I've seen people shift from cell culture work into animal work. I've seen people shift from animal work into cell culture work. I think that is a reflection of Ray's not knowing science from the inside, because scientists simply do not function that way.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sandgren, a question for you. How can you claim accurate predictive information when it was obtained from experiments on animals in which you introduced the disease to that animal?
So, if I understand the question, it is, how do we interpret research? How do we interpret the outcome of disease when that disease has been introduced into an animal? And how do we use that to give us any indication of a similar disease process in humans? Well, humans aren't constantly affected by disease. All of us are given diseases. Maybe when we're in the airport, maybe when we're, oh goodness, in the daycare center. And so when you design an experiment and you give an animal a disease, that's really simply controlling the timing of a process that occurs naturally in the human population. So I really don't see any reason at all why that is a problem. In fact, it's a strength because it allows you to control the situation better and therefore gather more information.
Could you repeat the question?
If I can find it. How can you claim accurate predictive information when it was obtained from experiments on animals in which you have introduced the disease to that animal?
Well, that's actually an easy question to answer. If you're going to claim predictability, you have to explain slides like this, okay? And you have to explain slides like the one that I showed with the 6 drugs in the head-to-head comparisons. And you have to use the word prediction the way that scientists and even bookies use the word prediction. And I just ignored it when Eric said it the first time, but he's now said 2 or 3 times that I don't know science from the inside. Actually, I have done research on animals. I did a year of neuroscience research on animals. We drilled little holes in their skull. We lesioned parts of their brains. And the study that we were doing is we were looking for obesity centers. I never got anything published out of that, but I did work on it for a year. I've also had, I think, 11 papers published in the peer-reviewed scientific literature. I've had numerous abstracts presented based on human research, and so on and so on. So I'm curious as to why Eric says I don't know science from the inside. I think my CV would dispute that. Now, clearly, I don't have an NIH grant, and given what I say about NIH, I'm not likely to get an NIH grant. But I don't think that we can say, you know, the definition of a scientist is someone who has a grant from NIH. Einstein never had one, okay? I'm no Einstein, let me assure you, but we do have that in common. So I would like to keep this discussion more on a scientific level. And the slide that I showed about why animal experimentation persists, guilt is one reason. I've done numerous debates in this country and abroad, and frequently a woman will come down to the podium at the end of the debate with tears in her eyes, and she'll say, "Dr. Greek, if what you say is true, why have I killed all those rabbits?" That's guilt, okay? And the psyche doesn't like guilt, and it doesn't like to deal with guilt. So guilt is absolutely one of those reasons. I didn't dwell on it because, again, I think tradition and resistance to change are much bigger and more important reasons.
Thank you. A question for you, Dr. Greek. Can you talk about the use of primates in Parkinson's research in general, and specifically in deep brain stimulation?
As a matter of fact, I can. I've been working on that subject for about the past year, and I just wrote my little 50 to 100-page summary of that topic. Parkinson's disease was discovered in humans, it was worked out in humans, and so on and so on. The big breakthrough that the animal model community claims about Parkinson's disease came when physicians noticed that some people who had used illicit drugs came in demonstrating Parkinson's-like syndrome. The drug was called MPTP, and some of the animal model community said, wow, let's give this drug to monkeys and let's see what it does. And it does reproduce the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. It does not reproduce the disease in its entirety, and it certainly doesn't reproduce the disease in its etiology. The other claim to fame for non-human primates in Parkinson's research is in the area of deep brain stimulation. This is a very long story. And again, when I did my little summary, it was like 50 to 100 pages. To make a long story short, we drilled a lot of holes in a lot of monkeys' heads and put electrodes down there to see what would happen. Okay? But what the animal model community fails to also explain is that before we were doing any of that in monkeys, we had done a lot of that in humans. And the real claim that the animal model community says is that the reason we do deep brain stimulation on a very specific area of the locus coeruleus, okay, the subthalamic nuclei, they claim that we had never thought of doing that lesion in humans before they did it in monkeys. And again, if you really read the literature, and trust me, there's hundreds and hundreds of articles in the literature that you have to read, that simply is not true. The subthalamic nuclei was isolated as a potential target in the 1920s. Okay, long before. Now, it was ignored. I mean, I'll grant you that. And the monkey studies kind of woke the scientific community back up to using the STN in deep brain stimulation. But no, there was no discovery there.
So I haven't just finished writing a 100-page monograph on Parkinson's in animal models. I do know a little about it. Some of that work is being done here. And I would comment that in many cases, reproducing symptoms, whether or not by the same route, can be a very useful function of animal modeling, particularly if you can then use that animal as a way to identify a means to treat those symptoms. And that is the basis of very many studies. I made that point in one of my slides, that complex systems can be different yet still have the same output. Since we're getting within 2 minutes of close, I want to just make a couple of comments. One, I think that both of us have commented that it's important for you to go out and check facts. So go to Dr. Greek's website and take a look at the information there. Check some of these papers that we've been referring to. Think yourselves about prediction. Scientists use prediction in the way that I've used prediction. And I apologize if Ray thinks that we had a discussion on a different topic, but the way prediction is used among scientists, I think I covered it very appropriately. The final comment I want to make is that I think despite the differences that we have, this forum provides an outstanding means for you and for anybody else looking in to hear how two individual people who come at an issue from a different perspective view that issue. And hopefully that will provide you with a couple of models at least that you can test. Think about what I've said. Think about what Ray has said. Do some reading, and try to determine then which of us you agree with, or maybe neither of us, or maybe both of us. And that's what I do when I haven't prepared 100-page monographs on questions, but I think those are important things to say. I'm really pleased that this event happened and that Ray took part in it.
Okay, it is 9 o'clock, and we promised everyone that they'd be out of here in 2 hours. Let's give a big hand to these two gentlemen for their excellent presentation. And on behalf of the three of us, thank you very much for attending. I hope that you go away with learning more about this subject. It's a very important one, a very emotional one, and one that will be debated, I think, for some time to come. So thanks again.